Drew and Andy here. Andy is, of course, from Rock Chalk Talk, and we've kind of flipped the script. We're doing the Q&A for Rock Chalk Talk, and now we're doing it for Viva. Andy, diving into things here. You guys haven't lost since January 25th to be exact. What do you think? Of course, Kansas is always great at basketball. Bill Self is a great coach. What do you think's kind of led to this run that you guys have been on of 8 straight?
Yeah, it has been pretty remarkable, how well they've been able to overcome all the different arenas they've been in and all the different fan bases they've had to contend with. And what really it is, I mean, we've seen all kinds of times where, Frank Mason's been off for a couple games, or Wayne Selden's been off for a couple games, or Devontae Graham, is a superhero one game, and then the next game he's absolutely, just not really making any shots or anything like that. Really, the two things that have really saved us during this entire streak is, one, the incredible depth that this team has. Coming into the year, everybody was talking about how, well, Kansas doesn't have the most talented lineup in terms of at the top. They're talking about Buddy Hield and a few other players, George Nang from Iowa State, a lot of these elite players that Kansas just didn't have. But what Kansas has always had is they've had a very large rotation of players that can step up and can actually make plays when needed to. And we've seen that. It's in all those games, it's been, a different one or two players every time that's actually come and saved the day for us. And what we've seen is a lot of these other teams like Oklahoma, West Virginia, they are all extremely talented teams, but they don't have the depth, and the fatigue is starting to get to them. So they're losing games, that they probably shouldn't be losing. Oklahoma losing at Kansas State. Don't get me wrong, Kansas State, at home isn't a cupcake by any means, but you could tell in that game that Buddy Hield was just worn down. He was having a hard time being his usual self. And when you rely so much on a couple elite players and don't have that rotation of guys that you can turn to without a huge drop off in talent, you run into problems that Kansas has been able to avoid because they have that depth. But the second one would have to be Perry Ellis. He has been playing like that elite, superstar at the college level that you would expect. You know, we get a lot of flack about how long Perry Ellis has been in the conference, because everybody, him, and then like Phil Forte from Oklahoma State, they all seems like they've been here forever. But this year, prior to this year, his best performance was his sophomore year, where he had a really, really strong performance offensively. But he wasn't the main guy. This year, he's now gone back to being the main guy, but he's still putting up an offensive performance, equaling that, or actually even better in a lot of cases. He has really come on strong. We can consistently turn to him when we have problems, and he can bail us out. So the depth and then Perry Ellis, I think, would be the two main reasons that Kansas has been able to hold on during this entire run and go from, a couple games back and looking like the streak may be over to now we're a couple games clear, and there's not really much time left for anybody to try to catch us at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I'm pretty sure if y'all are to win on Saturday, it'll lock in that, 12th? Would it be 12 in a row regular season?
Right. Yeah. With the next time Kansas wins, or the next time that West Virginia and Oklahoma both have a loss, they've clinched at least a share. So the hope, obviously, ideal scenario would be for Kansas to win on Saturday and both Oklahoma and West Virginia to lose, and they can clinch it outright. And then there's no talk about, having to share, or, it kind of takes the pressure off next week if that happens, because even if we were to lose at Texas and then Iowa State were to come in and complete the season sweep, we would still have the title to ourselves. We can get guys some rest. We can get guys, ready to go for the postseason. I don't really expect that to happen. I'm expecting at least Oklahoma or West Virginia to win, regardless of what happens between Kansas and Texas Tech on Saturday. So I'm expecting another come down to the end of the season finish, which I wouldn't really want anything less with the way the Big 12 has been this year.
Yeah, exactly. It's been pretty crazy season, and you kind of mentioned postseason play. What do you think Kansas needs to do to lock up a number one seed in the NCAA tournament?
Lock up a number one seed. I mean, the thing is, there aren't really any bad losses left out there for Kansas to get. So even if Kansas were to lose, at Texas, or if they lost, to Texas Tech on Saturday, or even if they lost 2 of their last 3 games, these are still quality opponents, and they still have, I believe I was looking on Ken Palm, and then looking on, ESPN and all of their information, talking about how Kansas still has the most top 25 wins, in the RPI, and then also in Ken Palm's ratings. They have more than, and then they have at least as many or more than everyone else in top 50 wins as well. I mean, so they have a lot of really good wins, so they could withstand another loss or two, I think, and still get that number one seed. As it stands right now, pretty much everyone says that they are the overall number one, and get to pick whatever region they want. But there's not a lot of other teams that are kind of, beating down the door on a huge run, saying that, well, Kansas is going to drop out. We saw Villanova lose to Xavier. So, yeah, Xavier's making a run up, but Villanova, is falling back towards them a little bit. There just really aren't a lot of opportunities for other teams to race ahead without hurting one of the other teams that's up at the top. That being said, if we lose 2 of these games and then we lose in the first round of the Big 12 tournament, I think that's enough of a question, to be losing 3 out of 4 games going into the NCAA tournament, that someone might say, oh, well, maybe we should drop them down to that 2 line there.
Mm-hmm.
I think they would probably still be, I don't see them dropping any further down than maybe 5 or 6 on that S curve there. So they would probably, be the first or second best 2 seed, just based off the resume they have at this point. But I think it would really take a big collapse, losing a couple home games, or, having a huge loss at Texas or something like that, for that doubt to really creep back in and for Kansas to be pushed off the 1 line.
All right. And then, since Tech's not really ever good at basketball, what are people's views on them outside of the Texas Tech alumni or fan base? Because to me, the only, I guess, and this is no disrespect, it'd be like if a Kansas football team went 8-4. Like, that's kind of the way I would see it, from a football standpoint. But like, outside of the Texas Tech fan base or alumni, like, how do people outside of that view this Texas Tech basketball team and kind of the quick turnaround they've done?
Yeah, I mean, I think this particular team, it's kind of a surprise to a lot of people. It was kind of like the year that, that second to last year under Mangino, where Kansas went 11-1, all of a sudden was ranked number 2 at one point, and then won the Orange Bowl. Obviously the season's not over, so Tech doesn't really have, that ending yet at this point, but just making the NCAA tournament at this point, I think is, pretty comparable to Kansas getting into those big time bowls. Just given the history that you guys do have, I mean, having Bobby Knight there, and he was getting you guys, kind of back to a point where people were thinking about Texas Tech in terms of basketball. But then, when his son took over, he kind of kept it there for a while, but it started to go downhill. And at that point, it was kind of, Texas Tech was slipping back down to where a lot of people just didn't really think about them too much.
Yeah, especially
kind of in the same way as with Kansas football, it's, you go in and you really kind of expect to win, and you kind of feel bad for that team because they've had such, tough luck, hoping that something can go right for them, just not against your team. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, when Billy G took over and we went 1-18 in the Big 12, that definitely didn't help. And so, since you guys are used to being a number 1 seed, I think Tech will end up being probably our 8 or 9 seed, when it comes down to it. I mean, as a 1 seed, when you play that second round matchup in the NCAA tournament against an 8 or 9 seed, I guess kind of what's your confidence level? Right now, me personally, if I was a 1 seed and I saw Texas Tech in the second round, I think they would, be thinking about, oh, these guys upset Oklahoma, Iowa State, Baylor 3 straight times. straight up blew Baylor out of the water, won by 18. What would your mindset be going in if you were to face a 8 or 9 seed team that's kind of been on fire towards the end of the season?
Yeah, that's always a concern for the 1 or 2 seeds to catch, that 7 to 10 range team that is had some tough luck, so the resume is just not quite there to push them higher, but has been playing really well recently. Unfortunately, that range there, that 7 to 10, range is a lot of you have basically two types of teams. Ones that loaded up on a tough schedule at the beginning of the year and kind of faded down the stretch, but still have the resume to put them there. And those teams you're not necessarily too concerned about. I mean, obviously they can give you a game, but you're not really scared of them. But then there's those other teams that had a rough start, or in the case of Tech, they had a pretty good non-conference, but they're in a conference that's just so tough that they have a hard time fighting up, into the top 3 or 4 of the conference and getting off of that 7 to 10 line. Tech is definitely the type of team that you look for to make a deep run, in the tournament. The kind of team, like they look a lot like Wichita State did, it was like 3 years ago when they were an 8 seed and they upset, I believe it was Pitt. They have that kind of look to them. So especially if they can solidify that though with a couple big wins down the stretch here. I mean, honestly, if Texas Tech comes into Lawrence and wins on Saturday, I would have a hard time, seeing them putting up the kind of performance that would keep them from climbing up to a 5 or a 6 seed. So I mean, there's still a lot that Tech can get up to at this point. Right now, yeah, I agree. I think I've seen them mainly on that 7 or 8 line, and at that point, I think that's a really scary team for one of those top seeds. But Tech has a lot of talent, honestly, more than everybody gave them credit for coming into the year, and I could easily see them jumping up another couple lines.
Yeah, exactly. I think because last year, we did struggle. A lot of our key, core players were freshmen, and I kind of like how Tubby, basically left them out there, to figure it out on their own. Because this year, this team has a lot of chemistry, and they are putting together some wins. And so, in our Q&A we did a minute ago, I know you said, like 85, 81. What do you think the key factors are for Kansas to pull out this win? Do you see Tech having any advantages in this game at all, or what do you think are the key attributes and matchups in this game?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, I'm not as familiar with Tech as I wish I was coming into this type of preview. Kind of just knowing the way that Kansas has struggled. They have, and they've been doing this for years, but for some reason they have a hard time. They're either extremely hot coming out of the gate and race out to a 15, 20 point lead early in the first half, or they just kind of move along enough to keep from getting behind too much, giving the other team a lot of confidence, letting them really set up what it is that they want to do, and then Kansas has to claw their way back and try to get back within it within the first half there. I think the issue with Kansas right now is just that they're inconsistent. Individually as players, you have one player who can have a phenomenal game and carry the team on his back one game. We're talking, and this one I'm talking about Devontae Graham, where he carried them against Buddy Hield in Oklahoma in Norman. But then the next game they go, and play Kansas State, and he doesn't make anything until the very end when he hits one shot and then hits a bunch of free throws where Kansas couldn't hit any free throws all night. And he basically disappears until the very end of the game. We have a lot of players like that. Wayne Selden, goes on extreme streaks. He played really well over the summer when they played over at the World University Games. One could argue he was the MVP of the team because he was just so good over there. And he started to show that at points early in the season, but he has 4 or 5 game stretches where he only scores a couple points, makes a couple baskets and has a lot of problems. He's gotten better at doing things off the ball and still being, positively contributing. But basically what that leads to is we have to figure out every single night how the game is going to go, who's actually going to show up to play that day, who can we rely on for that day. And so a lot of times we'll see a lot of teams that can do pretty much whatever they want in the first half, and then Kansas is able to lock down on defense in the second half. They find out who it is they're going. They start feeding the ball to those guys. What I'm really looking forward to in this game, though, and I know in the last Q&A that we did there, where you were kind of going over the Texas Tech players, I'm really interested in that matchup down low. Landon Lucas has come on really strong in the last 4 to 5 games. He was kind of the missing piece that Kansas had early in the year when they were struggling. Bill Self is well known for trying to run through the post. And so, he had when Danny Manning was his big man coach here, one of the best big man coaches I've ever seen, honestly. He was really, really good at developing guys, and Self could just rely on, my guys down low know what they're doing. We're going to feed them as much as possible. And Self has a really hard time getting away from that because that's the way his game has been set up. But he also recognizes the importance of, that down low and how that can set the tone for the entire game. And so I think that's going to be a big deal in this game, whether Jamari Traylor and Landon Lucas can stay out of foul trouble and can control the post, and keep Texas Tech from getting easy baskets down low. I think it is going to be difficult because, Tech does have some talent down low. But ultimately the main key is going to be whether Landon Lucas can continue to show that great improvement that he has just in the last, 5, 6, 7 games. So.
Okay, nice. And yeah, I'm ready to see how Tech matches up with, down low with the big guys because a lot of our points have been coming in the paint. So it'll be interesting to see if that, if their game plan changes any or if Tubby sticks with it. So before we close out here, I know you hit me with the pizza or lasagna bonus question. So I have a good one, and it's still basketball related. If you had to associate a spirit animal with the crowd at the Fog, what animal would you pick and why?
Oh gosh, that's a good one. Spirit animal to associate with the Fog. I mean, the easy cop out would be, the Jayhawk, of course, but since that's not an actual real animal, I think that one would be cheating. Let's see, an animal to associate with the crowd. I mean, I want to say something, like a viper because they can be pretty deadly. They know like right when to strike, and they can be really patient. But you get on their bad side, and they can really turn the tide really quickly. But even then, I don't think that would cover just how wild that they could be. So really, I think the best way to describe them, I think, would probably be a chimpanzee. And the reason being is they can be thoughtful, they can be low key and understated when they need to be. They're very smart about what it is they're doing all the time, and so the crowd, the one thing that kind of comes to mind with that is when Oklahoma came to visit. All you heard about afterwards was, Kansas won that game. Obviously, Kansas fans, we never rush the court, but a lot of that's just because of the state of the program. It's kind of expected that we don't, and that's a completely different discussion for a different day. But the talk about how the people that were in the section over where Buddy Hield was being interviewed stopped what they were doing, listened to the interview, and then applauded and kind of greeted him and said good game and all that stuff afterwards. So but then also when things really get exciting, we all have seen all the clips of a chimpanzee just going crazy and just tearing stuff to pieces. So when we get to the point where we're ready to go ahead and do that, they really know how to live it up, and they really know how to go ahead and get going and get excited and really just cause havoc. So.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I definitely, if I had to put one on us, I'd say definitely like a jackrabbit because our fans are ready just to run around the court as soon as they get a chance. Because we rushed the court against a 14th ranked Iowa State team. You give us any reason to rush the court, and we'll do it. I was really surprised that when we beat Oklahoma State at the buzzer in our first matchup that we didn't rush the court. So it's definitely the difference between Kansas and Tech basketball. But, yeah, it was nice getting to do this, the hangout and do it this way, and we'll definitely have to do it during football season.
Yep, definitely. All right, thanks.
No problem. Thank you, sir.